Okay, welcome everybody to today's episode of Expat Entrepreneurs. I'm really, really excited to be joined by our guest today, and that guest is Philippa White. Philippa White, the CEO of the International Exchange, or TIE, which links future leaders from the commercial world with social initiatives across the globe. Hello, Philippa.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honor. I love meeting like-minded souls, and everyone here are like-minded souls.
As do I. So I'm really, really excited for our conversation today. And the first thing I like to ask pretty much anybody I meet virtually these days, to be honest, is to find out where in the world you're talking to me from right now. So where are you, Philippa?
I am right below the equator in Brazil. So I live in a city called Olinda. So if anyone is listening near a computer, just type Olinda. You're going to see a very sort of colorful old colonial town by the sea. And yeah, that's where I am. So it's the closest point to Portugal. So if you see the map, it's kind of where it sort of jots out the furthest point, and that's where I am.
So you're right on the coast, yeah?
I'm right on the coast, yeah.
Yeah, which sounds pretty idyllic, I have to say. Sounds
actually
fantastic.
Olinda, if the linda in Portuguese means beautiful, and the story goes that when the Portuguese founded here, they looked on the top of the hill and they said, "Oh, Linda," and it became Olinda.
Fascinating. So why are you in that location? Well, that's a pretty random pin on the map. And as somebody who sort of works with expats a lot for my daily life, I'm used to certain locations cropping up on a regular basis. I've never yet spoken to anyone who's where you are. So why are you there?
I know, and you can imagine, because when I'm having conversations with people, I say, "Oh, you're in Brazil, so you must be in Rio or Sao Paulo." Nope.
Yep.
Nope. I'm 3.5 hours north of Rio and Sao Paulo, actually, by plane. So my the father of my kids, actually, he is Brazilian. Met him in London. So I became aware of this part of the world. But I set up my company in this part of the world because of what we do. And I really wanted people, the way that we used to work, people physically immerse themselves in experiences that push them out of their comfort zones. And I'll get into that in a sec. But basically, I needed a place that people didn't go on holiday, or I was working in advertising at the time where people went on shoots. So Cape Town is a part of my life as well, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But that was my original thinking. And I thought, no, Cape Town's quite Western. So then I thought, no, we're going to go to the Wild West. And that's essentially where I am. So I arrived in 2004 to sort of learn about it the first time. 2005, I moved here, and I've been here ever since. I've got 2 little girls who only speak to me in Portuguese. I speak to them in English. They're 7 and 11, and it's home. It's home.
Amazing. It's a country I've always wanted to travel to and not made it to yet. I think it's completely for obvious reasons of being a young football fan, and I've always wanted to get to South America and get to Brazil, and I've got a signed Pele shirt on my office wall at home and all that stuff. It's got so much romance as a country. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot about it I want to come and experience. So pretty envious on that score. So okay, so I normally have a question that I ask people of a like mind, if you like, and I like to try and find out, were you an expat first or you were an entrepreneur first? Now, I know with you that question isn't really going to work, because you've kind of grown up as a citizen of the world right from the get-go. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to go back as far as you'd like to, really. And give us a little bit of a backstory of your journey from, which starts in South Africa, I believe, right?
Yeah, so I was born in South Africa, and actually it's a good question, and it is relevant, actually, because my accent's Canadian. I was born in South Africa, but even though half my family is still there, and whenever I would go there on holiday, oh my God, I mean, I would say that my my connection to South Africa is a big reason why I even started my company. And it goes back to my uncle, who actually was Nelson Mandela's doctor when he came out of prison and started negotiations with the apartheid government. And, my family in South Africa are incredibly inspirational. So it had a huge impact on my life, but I moved to Canada when I was 3, well, 2.5. So, my accent's Canadian. Culturally, I would say that my brother and sister are probably more Canadian than I am, even though they've got the similar background to me, but I never completely felt like I fit in. And my mom and my even though my dad's side of the family is from South Africa, he actually went to boarding school in Edinburgh and then went to St. Thomas's Hospital to study. He went to medical school. My mom's from London. So the culture growing up was very British, even though I grew up in Canada. So my parents' accents are very British. I had an English accent until I was about 7 or 8, I think. But as I say, I definitely had my eye on other places. As I say, I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It was very cold. But like I was saying to you just before we started recording, what's interesting is in Canada, for those of you that aren't familiar with Canada, the license plates of all the provinces have a phrase that kind of sums up that province. And so, your wife is from Vancouver. And so, beautiful British Columbia, wild rose country for Alberta. And we have friendly Manitoba. And it always was a very friendly place, a nice place to bring up children. But I always kind of wanted more. So I went to business school in London, Ontario. I went to the Ivy Business School. And then I actually finished my degree in Bangkok, Thailand. So I lived in Bangkok for a little while. That was extraordinary. And then from there, I moved to London. And so I worked in advertising in London. I would say that's probably when I became an expat. I was an expat in Bangkok, of course, for sort of the 6 months that I was living there. So I definitely had that feeling, but and I traveled around, I traveled around Europe, did this sort of gap year thing. So I lived, I guess, as an expat, but properly working, immersing myself in a completely different culture and really trying to figure it out for myself was when I moved to London to work in advertising. So that would have been my first major job.
So when you
in 2001.
So when you say, that's when you became an expat, presumably, I think most of us would empathize with that there's a difference between being part of an expat family and striking out on your own as an adult into the professional world as an international worker, right?
Yeah, I think all of us can probably relate to this feeling of taking that leap, because obviously you're moving away from your social network that you've grown up with. You're really having to push yourself out of your comfort zone, and there's no guarantees, right? So it's sort of, you have to figure out a lot of stuff. I was lucky because I have a British passport, but there's a lot of people here listening, I'm sure, that don't. And so they had to figure out the visa. They had to get sponsored by a company. There's just a lot of hurdles, and I didn't have to go through that, but it's still just figuring out the banking system of where you're working, figuring out the where the doctors, just figuring out your whole new network to be able to live a comfortable life, and obviously and meet friends. I remember going out and meeting people and thinking, I'm not sure I would normally be friends with this person, but I'm just going to add them to my phone list and call them up because I have no other way of expanding my kind of personal circle and meeting new people. So that would definitely have been when I started working. And but yeah, it was extraordinary. I got the bug, and obviously, I moved to England in 2001, and it was in 2005 that I moved to Brazil.
So your work in London, you mentioned in the advertising space, yeah?
Yeah. So I worked for a really small company when I first arrived. I'm sure a lot of people here have their sort of 9/11 stories, but I was actually on a flight going from London to Toronto to basically then go to Winnipeg to get my stuff to then move to England and start this job hunt. I was on the plane as 9/11 kicked off, and we were the last plane to not have to be grounded at a different place. So we actually did make it to Toronto, but when we were over the Atlantic Ocean, the pilot said, there has been a global disaster. We can't say what it is, but just so you know, we might have to sort of land pretty much anywhere. I'm hoping we can get home. I will tell you, when we land, what's happened. So, I mean, that was just a bit ominous. But obviously, when I arrived in Toronto and then Winnipeg, my parents were even though they were quite adventurous, lived in South Africa, lived in England, my dad did say to me, probably not a good idea to move to England right now and try and look for a job. It's probably better to stay home. And I was like, nope, gonna do it. I'll make it work. And actually, I was really lucky. Within 2 weeks, I did find a job, but it was at a very small agency, and it's sort of the smaller agencies can weather storms a little bit bigger, or a little bit better than sort of the big ones that were obviously having to lay off a lot of people. Yeah. So I worked in that really small agency. It was fantastic for a year. And then I got a job at Darcy, which then turned into Leo Burnett. And then I worked at BBH. And that was without a doubt the best possible thing I could have done. I loved the industry, but it was a big reason to why I started what I'm doing now. And I would say that most of my clients in my network is still very much part of that. I'm still very much in touch with many of the people that I worked with.
How is that space, the advertising space as an industry to work in? I mean, I'm in a, I guess, a fringe industry of that in the marketing space, but I don't consider myself to be a hardcore sort of advertising specialist. And we're all familiar with things like Mad Men. We're looking at the advertising industry as it was in the 50s and 60s. How was it back then in the industry that you were working in at that time?
I was really lucky. I mean, really lucky. And working at Darcy, which then turned into Leo Burnett, I was really lucky to be surrounded by so many brilliant, good and nice and smart and really determined but fair people. I look at the people that I was friends with, and they're all running companies, the heads of departments, heads of companies now. At BBH, they do actually say the only way you can get a job is if you're good and nice. You have to be very good at what you do, but you also have to be bloody nice. And I would say that the people that I worked with were that. I was also really lucky because Sir John Haggerty, who's one of the founders of BBH, is one of our advisors. I speak to him regularly. Nigel Bogle. I haven't seen him recently, but when I go to London, obviously because of the pandemic, I haven't really been able to go back as much as I do, but the next time I go, I do hope to be able to see him. Jeremy Bullmore, Martin Sorrell was one of my clients. I didn't speak to him regularly, but he certainly was one of our clients, and I presented in front of him a few times. So John Steele, just really incredible people who, what I do is it's a very human initiative. It's very much rooted in purpose and sustainability and humanity. And all the good people in the industry that I've had anything to do with have just supported what I do. And it's just because I've just been really lucky. So I haven't seen a lot of the sort of the ruthless side of the industry, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. So you speak very endearingly of your experience back then. So, but obviously you made a decision to leave that behind.
Yeah.
So let's go there. So what drove that change?
I think it was. I mean, we're talking back in 2004, so it was a long time ago. But it was certainly the start of this feeling of a need for more, for people to want to do more and be more within their roles, but also just knowing that within themselves. And what do I mean by that? I'll maybe just back up a little bit to when I went to university, because I studied business at university. And I remember being asked to chant, "The main goal of business is to make money," in the classroom. And even though I had no job experience at the time, I didn't feel that really resonated with me. And I think it's probably because a lot of my family, well, all of my family come from the helping people industries, which is what I like to call them. So as I mentioned, my uncle in South Africa, obviously, he was very much, he was a physician, but obviously his connections with Nelson Mandela, his connections with the struggle in South Africa. My father was a doctor. the president of the Patient Safety Committee, the president of the Quality Care Board. You know, there was just a lot of passion and humanity in what they did. And when I was listening to this chanting in the classroom, I thought, even though, as I say, I didn't have a lot of job experience at all, or work experience, but it didn't feel right. And fast forward to kind of 2004, my uncle passed away, and I went to his funeral in South Africa, in Cape Town. And when I looked around the congregation at his celebration of life, there was this sea of faces, and you know, so many different colors, so many different backgrounds. We had family members, we had, you know, comrades from the struggle. We had, you know, there was a bodyguard. There were two bodyguards and a government minister, and then there were people from the shanty towns. And what really struck me were a couple of the stories that were told. One woman put her hand up and she went to the front and she said, "I was in jail in a black area in Cape Town. And Neil risked his life going to this jail every so often, I don't know how often it was, and passed chocolates with messages of what was happening on the outside. And during a really dark time of my life, he was the light." And then this other gentleman went to the front and he said, "In our community, a lot of people don't speak English and they don't speak Afrikaans. You know, we speak a really local language." And he made a real effort to learn that language because all the other doctors treated us like animals. They couldn't actually communicate the local language, but he did. And he treated us like humans and was able to, you know, be a doctor rather than a vet. And that really struck me because my uncle was one of the most inspirational people that I knew. And when I really started to reflect on why, it was because he expanded his personal circle and he exposed himself to people outside of his professional background, his cultural background, his, you know, everyday background. And not only did that make him really inspirational, but it also impacted a lot of these people's lives. And I started to reflect. So this was in 2004. So I was aware at that time, there was a lot of talk around, it was more CSR. There wasn't talk of sustainability, ESG, obviously not, you know, purpose also not, but there was shared value also not, but, you know, CSR, but there was that feeling that people wanted to know that what they could offer the world had a greater purpose in the whole scheme of things. Those rumblings were starting. And then, as I say, I took it one step further and I sort of looked, okay, it's so easy for us to get stuck in our silos. So expat entrepreneur, I think, is fascinating because obviously a lot of the listeners here, they will have already broken out of the sort of the culture. They've been keen to broaden their horizons and enrich their lives by doing something different. And I think a lot of people don't manage that. And it's a shame. And they get stuck. And even actually doing that from a traveling point of view is fine. But even still, as we get more senior, we can still move to different places, but we still find ourselves to be quite siloed. And the more experienced you get, the more siloed you get, right? And so I was looking at life at BBH, and as much as I loved it, I could see that people wanted to feel proud of what they knew. They didn't want to quit their jobs, but they needed to do more and be more. There was this need for people to break out of their silos and to be able to improve their lives by doing that. But this celebration of life just kept playing over my head that us doing that also impacts other people's lives. And then there was just the fact that, you know, the private sector has the power to make real change. And if we look at the human and financial resources that the social, you know, third sector have, they're very limited, but the private sector has the power to really make change if they want to. And we were also starting to see back then in 2004, which obviously it's moved ahead like crazy, but you could start to see it then. People want to work at places that they can connect to, that they believe in, that there's that connection with them as a person. The purpose is clear. What, you know, it's not just about money. What am I working all these hours for? Yeah. But then also customers are wanting to be able to buy things that they feel aren't ruining the world. And so there were those dynamics, but in order to get the private sector to have the vision to know how to move forward, to have that empathy, to have that flexibility, we need to have leaders who are able to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, challenge the status quo, have that flexibility, have those insights, have that courage to be able to challenge the system. And so with all of that, and again, it was a long time ago, but in 2005, I moved to Brazil. 2006, I started Thai. And basically, we are comfort zone disruptors. That's what we do. And the way we do it is, like you mentioned at the beginning, is by connecting people. Like, we are a unique professional development program that connects, that unleashes people's ingenuity, their humanity, and their purpose by connecting them with social challenges in other parts of the world. And so that's why I set it up. The way that we did it was we had to we physically sent people to places. They had 30 days to crack a challenge facing an organization in Zambia, for example. And they would use what they know in a very short amount of time, using very limited resources, proving necessity is the mother of invention. And in 30 days, cracking a real challenge that will really impact people's lives in Zambia. But as you can imagine, for all the reasons I've just mentioned, it makes them so much better as humans and as professionals. But then, of course, COVID hit and it blew up our entire business model. So I have to say the last couple of years have been really hard, but also remembering that necessity is the mother of invention. We've completely, reformed whatever Thai was and become a completely different initiative, and it's even better than it was before. So,
most businesses across the planet have had to do that to some degree, really, in the last couple of years. I have to say, just when you describe, and you've done it very concisely there, you describe what Thai does. I mean, when I first read it, I thought, wow, this is like, it's like the escape room, but just like a million times better, a million times more meaningful. We've all done those sort of corporate, team building events and things, but a lot of the time it's a bit of a sort of throwaway, just have a bit of fun, a little bit of an indulgence maybe, but the spin that you put on it, with a real a real exchange of value, and value, value being given at both ends of the equation, I think is really, really fantastic. So I'm interested in how you came up with the format around that. So obviously you said that you were getting a sense from people around you, colleagues and peers, that there was a thirst for this type of breakout, this type of opportunity. So, but were ideas getting fed to you by some of those people around specifically how you would put this together and how you would structure it? Or did that come out of the ether?
No. God, that's a very good question. And actually, no one has ever asked me that. And if I really think back to, I started developing the business plan in 2004. It really was after the celebration of life of my uncle that I came back. I then went to Brazil, saw Brazil. So I had this kind of percolating, went to Brazil, realized, oh my God, this could be okay. And then I remember, I didn't know even what it would be, but I took what I called a mental health day. And I literally remember sitting on this, because obviously I was only 20 something. I was sitting on this horrible office chair that was sort of all broken, but I just couldn't afford another one. And I remember just sitting there for, I think, 8 hours straight. I literally just sat there like this with my head, for people who are listening and not watching the video, sort of with my hands on my head and just kind of with my elbows on the table and just thinking and thinking and thinking. And then I sort of came up with a rough, I mean, it literally was that. And I just sort of came up with this rough idea of, okay, I think taking people out of, they have to break free. They have to break out of what they're familiar with. It's the only way. Being in a situation that is, a different language, different culture, different people they've never worked with before, different industry that they've never worked in before. That's what we need to do, because that's what really pushes people. That's how growth happens, isn't it? I mean, the only way we can grow is by pushing ourselves in a way that we are never, I love this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that says, do one thing every day that scares you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how we actually should be living our lives, push through boundaries to unlock potential. And it was really kind of, okay, that's the only way, going to somewhere that's more familiar, doing these kind of, oh, let's do something as a group with all the same people that we know in a sort of, in a very organized and, situation. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fun kind of day out, but it's not really going to push people. And it's hard for us to feel properly pushed these days, but it's the only way that we can unleash that potential. So I kind of knew that, even though I don't know how I knew that because I was only 20 something, but I think, again, it came back to looking at this celebration of life and my uncle and just thinking, oh my God, I've never, for one person to see so many different, doctors, people in shanty towns, like just so many different people. There aren't very many people in this world that have managed to touch the hearts of literally such a breadth of different people, but everyone should be able to do that. Everyone should be able to do that because the world needs it. And we need it. So that was always the sort of crux of it. And then I was very lucky because I think as far as advice, if I could have any kind of takeaway for anyone listening, not enough people get help early on. So I don't know, again, how I knew to do this, but Sir John Haggerty, I went into his office, I started talking to him about it. Then he put me in touch with Sir Chris Powell. So then I went and met with him. Then I got in touch with Jeremy Bullmore. Then I got in touch with Gib Bullock, who he's left Accenture now, but he was a director at Accenture. He started Accenture Development Partnerships. So very quickly, I started pulling together this incredible team of people that would happily meet with me. And I met with them or spoke to them probably once a month or more to develop this business plan. And I would just be running thoughts past people. I'm still working full time. So when I would be finished work, then I'd be on my computer researching other organizations that were kind of similar, talking to people who are doing similar things, figuring out how we're different, what's different about it. And then the other piece of advice I could give to people is jump before you're ready. I think it gets to the point where you're developing your business plan or just figuring out what could happen. And then you know what? You just need to go and make something happen. So I actually did quit my job. I then just moved to Brazil. At the time, my partner at the time, he wanted to move back to Brazil. And I just thought, you know what? I need to now study the next part of that business model, which is obviously this side of the equation. And I needed to see if organizations would even be up for it, what that would look like, how would that work? So I moved here, I didn't know any Portuguese. So again, this is the other thing. I started to experience what Thai is. So I came here, I didn't know any Portuguese. I had to learn Portuguese. I had to kind of get the trust of people locally to see if they would even buy into this structure, try and sort of navigate this completely different world. And then I had to move back to Brazil to kind of freelance and cover the costs of this because I don't have any angel financing or any kind of investors in this. So it's not really a high return on investment scheme.
Yeah.
So and then by 2017, I piloted. So we became a company in 2006, and by 2017 in September, I had Wieden & Kennedy and Leo Burnett on board. And it really was just figuring out both sides of the equation, getting a rough idea as to how it could work, selling it in, following the advice of all these mentors that really helped guide me along the way, and then make it happen.
It's definitely there's definitely a building culture, and clearly from what you're talking about, it's started perhaps a long way further back than perhaps I would give it credit for. But I had an interesting, literally yesterday actually, I was lucky enough, I attended a talk by a gentleman called Stephen Bartlett. I'm not sure if you know that name. So Stephen Bartlett is a successful sort of internet entrepreneur, social media entrepreneur. And I was lucky enough to be at a talk by him here in Dubai yesterday, and I met him very briefly. And he founded a company called Social Chain, which he sold for megabucks. And he built this company up in Manchester, and it was basically a load of 20-somethings creating social media accounts and building up audiences and therefore building up value for brands and advertisers and so forth. And he he talked about how his entire ethos of building up that company and attracting people to it was by looking at the product he was working with and saying, look, well, the way we're going to be attractive to people who I want to come and work for us is for us to look like a really attractive business on social media, so that when these people join us and they're sharing with their friends and they can see what a cool workspace they have, what an even keeled workplace they have, what a flexible workplace they have, they want to come, their peers want to come and work for us as well, because he wasn't paying them more than anybody else. He wasn't able to offer them gravy train packages or anything like that, but he attracted the people that he wanted to attract by creating an environment that appealed to that type of person. And one of the things he did, which is really interesting, which I think connects a little bit with what you're talking about, is that as part of the package he offered people, he gave them the license to take at any point, you could take 6 months off and you would guarantee that your job would still be there when you came back.
Nice.
The only proviso was that you had to travel the world during that 6 months.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's somebody who gets it.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. It's professional development mixed with personal discovery, and you come back a much more valuable person to everybody around you, basically.
You really do.
Yeah.
The world is crying out for empathy, for flexibility, and for both individuals, but also companies to challenge the status quo and to challenge the model. And we all have to be willing to step out of our comfort zones to be able to do all of that. And it's these types of experience where we, developing that cultural intelligence is so important, to be able to understand the value of diverse teams and to be able to hire people who are unlike us, which is the key to everything, because we are so much better if we are riffing and sharing ideas with people from completely different backgrounds, because of course you're going to come up with better solutions. But we have to be able to see that value, and we have to be able to win the trust of people who are unlike us to be able to be able to create that dynamic. And the only way you can develop cultural intelligence as one of these competencies we're talking about is actually by going out and meeting people who are different to you. And it's really hard to do that in our day-to-day. I mean, of course, many of our listeners have stepped out of that, but also I think I would urge a lot of people listening, because I know when you're an expat, it's very easy to fall into the trap of only hanging out with other expats, and you go to the same bars as other expats, and your kids go to the international school, and so everyone's hanging out with the Americans or the French or whatever it is.
We've all done that.
And and it's just really important. Meet the locals, meet people locally, make that effort, because your life will be better.
And ultimately, that's why I think for most expats in general, entrepreneur or otherwise, that's whether it's conscious or whether it's in the back somewhere, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that,
totally.
As you said earlier on, extending that personal circle in a very real sense, and discovering more about the world and about yourself. And you're not going to do that by just going to speak to, in my case, other British people in my local Irish pub.
Totally.
And the equivalent of for other people. It's it's all about discovery. Let's just learn a little bit more detail, if we can, please, about Thai. You said that one of the reasons that you moved to Brazil was because some of the projects that you intended to work on are local to your location where you are. So what
they
sort
were
of, were
now we've expanded. No, exactly. That was our projects were here, and it just made sense for me to start it. But now we're in 25 countries around the world. So
wow,
we have organizations in a number of different places now that we work.
And how does that identification or selection process, if it is that, how do you identify those projects that you want to get involved in, or do you start them? How does it work?
No, that's a really good question. So it's networking. Obviously, having started working just in Brazil and with a number of organizations here, And also because a lot of my contacts are from the international development world, that if anyone here is from that world, you know, you move a lot. So it's kind of 2 years, maybe 3 years in each place, then you kind of find yourself dotted around. So it was nice because we obviously had a group of organizations here that were locals, but also organizations that were working with international development workers who then started traveling. So we managed through them very slowly at the beginning to start to get contacts in other countries. So Malawi was probably one of our next ones, just because one of the individuals who was based here ended up living in Malawi for a while. And then it would have been through, you know, we use a lot of networks. So it would be like Ashoka, maybe we found some, or the Global Giving. So there's a few sort of big global networks that we would use. But basically, it's a lot of hard work, I'll be honest, because it's finding credible organizations, then it's obviously vetting them. AFID is actually another one. Accountants for International Development. We have a lot of partnerships with different organizations. So organizations we work with that we like, we sort of share. So this amazing organization has, you know, we just worked with them. They're fantastic. You should work with them too. So and I have somebody who works with me who that's her job, is to reach out to different organizations. A lot of people now who know about us, so we'll get recommendations. Each project that we work on, you know, we'll ask, do you have any organizations locally that you can recommend? And it's that, but it's yeah, surprisingly, because of our business model, they don't pay. There is obviously work involved for them to be in, you know, to receive the support.
Yep.
And so, you know, they have to show desire to really kind of invest in the experience. But it's harder than it might seem.
I can imagine. Yeah. So okay. So let's delve into the business model that you have there then. So it's you've got corporates or individuals who want to enter into these programs? Corporates, yeah?
Yeah, so no, both. So we do, we have our corporate virtual team Thai experience, which we have Santander, you know, BBH, Leo Burnett, you know, a couple of other companies about to get on board. So since we've kind of moved away from the immersive experiences, we're sort of winding back up to where we were before. So that's so we do have that. And we also have a Thai accelerator program. They're both actually very, very similar. It's just the people that get involved are different. So for Thai accelerator, that is for individuals. So it's really cool. So we have right now a Thai accelerator program live. We have a co-CEO from the largest media agency in Australia. We have the head of operations and marketing of Suncor in Australia. We have head of a CSO from Hamburg, and we have the global media director from Oatly. So it's really amazing team, and they're working on this phenomenal project, which is working with ocean conservation in the working with reefs, the biggest reef system actually in the Atlantic, called the Mesoamerican Reef System. Amazing. So they're working on this, which is really cool, and it's an amazing team of people. And so a couple times a year we'll launch a Thai accelerator, and any seasoned professional from literally anywhere gets put together with other seasoned professionals that they don't necessarily know. And it's up to 6 people, and you get to crack a real challenge. And the benefits are, you know, of course, being able to do more, be more, enrich your life, broaden your horizons, work with people you wouldn't normally get to work with, do things that you just wouldn't normally get to do using what you know. So that's what Thai Accelerator is. And as I say, it's 6 weeks, 2 hours a day, virtually. All you really need is an internet connection. And it's very flexible, and you learn about international development, and you get to run this project with a group of people. And then the team virtual corporate opportunity, it's exactly the same model. It's for a group of people within a company. So Santander, for example, would have people from around the business. They would be having 6 people come together. It's fantastic because obviously in this virtual world, I mean, I'm amazed. There's so many people from a company that have never met before because of COVID, you know, and it's just, you sort of get stuck again, siloed in your everyday kind of, I'm meeting with my team and that's it. And I'm sort of doing what I need to do and sending it off to create those opportunities of, you know, cohesion and like this positive dynamic. It's really hard. And I have to say, I was so excited at the end of December. So December 31st, when people were starting to post on Instagram, you know, my 9 photos to sum up my year. I could not believe it. Somebody from BBH, she posted 3 out of those 9 photos were from, she was one of the 6 people that got involved with the Thai project. 3 out of those 9 photos were from her Thai experience. And this was not a corporate post. This was a personal post of something she was so genuinely excited by. And, you know, it just gave her that energy and that purpose that she kind of had been missing over the last little while, and it gave it to her. And that's why companies are getting involved. I think a lot of companies really want to give people the opportunity to break out of that hierarchy, to break out of their silos, to give them that space to be able to grow. But it's really hard to be able to do that because of course we've got those structures in place for, you know, risk reasons, right? Yeah. But what Thai does is it's an opportunity for people to really own something on their own terms with a group of people they would never have necessarily met or worked with before, and crack something real with real tangible impact in only 6 weeks. And so loads of companies are signing up for that reason. So
that's amazing. So if we go pre-COVID, then if I'm understanding correctly, then you would have assembled those teams, and at least for part of that time frame, they would have physically gone to sites, or
no? So that's a good question. So pre-COVID, it was one individual.
Okay.
And they would go for 30 days to that place.
I see.
We actually only had one model. It was only one way of working, and it would sort of be full immersion for 30 days to crack
for an individual,
challenge.
for
an individual.
Person.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would still in theory do that. It's just obviously it's impossible at the moment because it's just too much going on to make that possible. But you know, in the future we might go back to that. But what's really exciting about this is I do think the team dynamic is really powerful. There's a lot of benefits, and to have somebody be out of the office for 30 days is just, it's possible for some countries or companies, but it's difficult. There's a huge barrier to entry. So this is, you know, the team way of working. And I was concerned that the immersive experience was the only way to be able to unlock insights in a different language, in a different country, in a different culture, to be able to understand, you know, vulnerable girls in Malawi and how to help them, you know, gain financial independence. You know, can we do that virtually as a team? Oh my God, is that possible? And it is. And it's really impactful for the individuals. The takeaways are hugely positive, and the organizations, the impact is really powerful. We've made some real waves in a very short amount of time.
Which is fantastic. I love about the way you're doing it now is you've got essentially a third layer to that discovery piece for the person entering into the program, right? Because you've got, not only are they got the discovery piece and the experience of the project they're working on themselves, not only have they got the value that they bring to enhancing their own personal and professional growth, but in between time, you're also creating this mini network, this mini team that they're going to be part of for that time frame, which creates a whole nother dimension to it. So that group of people at the company will know each other for probably the rest of their lives. I mean, these groups, it's so beautiful. They call it their mojo coffees. I've had people, you know, for their meetings for these projects, I've had people get up at 3 o'clock in the morning in Sydney because there's a meeting with, you know, a government minister in Malawi to talk about whatever it is that they're doing on their project, and they really wanted to be a part of that meeting. You know, what other training courses do you know people getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to have to partake? It just doesn't happen. No. Most of the corporate training courses I've got on, people are normally going to bed at that time. So I'm not, you know.
Exactly.
to be honest. No, it's fascinating stuff. It really is, and I've not heard anything. I've not heard of anything like this at all. I mean, maybe you'll tell me that there are other people doing this type of thing. Is there anyone out there that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, not like this. There are, there's VSO, voluntary services overseas. They've been going for a really, really long time. There's a few similar, or they did work like that, but then over time they decided to kind of move away from it. And it's more insights for companies rather than these growth opportunities. I think with any company, I think it's just figuring out what is your, what is it that makes you you? What is it that, what is it about the experience? And I think the reason why people get involved is there's just this incredible energy. It is really, to be a part of it, you become a part of a family, really. You meet incredible people. The people on our team are amazing. And I think it's just this feeling. I don't know anything else out there, but I guess that's when you're an entrepreneur, right? You figure out what it is about you that makes you tick and what makes other people tick, and then that's what you hold on to, because I think that's your selling point, right? It's your point of difference.
I'd agree completely. Yeah. How big a enterprise is Thai now? You mentioned one other person earlier on when we were talking about the onboarding of new clients. Who else is around you?
We're small, so it's full-time. It's Uli and myself. And then we have Janice and another woman who, Janice is for the corporate work, we have leadership coaching as part of it as well. So there's team coaching that kind of just really kind of roots channels the experience from what people objectives point of view, what people hope to get out of it, and what, how to then channel that into their work at the back end. So we have her as a leadership coach. But then we also have her as our international development trainer. So those are really, really important parts of the experience for both Thai Accelerator, actually, from the international development experience training. That training is important because I think for people to be able to step out of the private sector, understand what is international development, why does it exist, colonialization, what does that look like now? The powers, we're seeing it now with everything that's happening with Russia and Ukraine. There's just a lot going on. The West, the East, what are those dynamics? How does the corporate world fit into all of that? So I think that's important because it just starts to sort of really lift the lid on some issues that are just really hard to be able to understand elsewhere, and where the third sector kind of fits in. So those are the people that we hire. As we're starting, because as I say, the pandemic for everybody was very, very difficult. So we were one of those companies that really struggled. But as I say, thankfully, we are starting to ramp back up again. And we've already got our eye on what another hire might be. But at the moment, it's just us. And I think the fact that for me, what's really important, I'm not in this to kind of create the next app and become a millionaire, obviously. So the whole purpose here is, it is unique, it is bespoke, it is very human. And as a result, we have groups of people that go through it, but it's very human. And so for me, I'm not looking at something that's going to be massive, but I do have plans. I imagine this time next year will be a fair size bigger, and we probably will have a couple other people working with us.
And how, from a sort of business management administrative standpoint, how are there any particular challenges that you faced locally or otherwise, establishing a business where you are there? Has it been that much harder? Have there been any hurdles that have been particularly high barriers to you?
So my company's in England, thankfully. So right. It's a British company. So that definitely has made life easier to some extent. But I would say the biggest would be fiscal. So I make money in England. I don't make money in Brazil. I live in Brazil. How does that work? So from a tax point of view. So that, I've had to set up a local kind of company here to be able to justify some of the tax that comes over, but then you get taxed twice and then you have to keep that under a certain thing. And then it's sort of transfers of money, TransferWise, thank God that exists, because I'm sure a lot of people here can relate to that. So being an entrepreneur and figuring out that would definitely be one of the biggest logistical challenges. And I would also say the banking system to figure that out in any place that you're living in, particularly when it involves a different language. That and like setting up your phone. I just think those are the two things that are really hard because it's sort of press 1, press 2, and you're like, I don't even understand what you're saying. And then it's sort of the banking system, because obviously when you're having to move money around in a different language, you need to make sure that you get it right, and it can be complicated, sort of withdrawal and what are those buttons and etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that was probably my hardest.
What about what about employing people? Is there a framework there for you to provide things like statutory benefits and things like that, payroll management? I mean, how easy is that for you to stay on top of?
Very good question. The way that I do that is I hire people through my English company, and so they work as independent contractors. So that's how I hire people. I can't hire people. I have somebody who works for me at my house, so she is hired as a local, and that's through my bank account here. And so she does have sort of all the benefits that she would have. But as far as for Thai, I hire people as contractors. So the people in England as well are hired as contractors.
Got you. Okay.
So I don't have them on here.
Got you. Okay. So your ambitions for Thai as it sits right now. I mean, you mentioned you expect the company to look significantly bigger.
I would say I probably wouldn't use the word significantly. I have a lot of people who are reaching out. I've actually got a call next week with somebody who is based in Singapore. She's the head of growth for a very big ad agency. She's looking to leave, and she wants to see if there's a way that she can get involved with Thai. I do get calls quite often from people who are very keen to get involved, and obviously there would be a way to be able to grow Thai significantly if I wanted to, by having somebody come on board as sort of a partner, and then we kind of really grow that in other markets and kind of get it going. I'm really resistant to that. I have to say, I am resistant to that. I really like how it is right now. I might go down that route, but right now I feel the way that it's working is really, it's what people are looking for. And I don't want to, maybe I'm one of those really annoying founders. It's like, I need to have control. I don't want to be totally like that, but I just feel, particularly right now, coming out of the pandemic, we still need to be very careful. So, as I say, I've got about 4 companies about to get on board that will grow things to an extent where I might need to just hire one other person locally to be able to manage the projects. Yeah, we'll see. Watch this space.
I mean, I would suspect that yes, I'm sure you want to retain control, but also you want to maintain that sincerity to the product, right, and the integrity to what you're doing without. Yeah. When things get big, inevitably, or certainly it can happen. That might get diluted. And
that's the reason why people, if I look at a lot of the companies that did work like us and they don't now, one, they didn't see, the desire to kind of go down the insight route for companies. So they have big banks that are involved, their interests or their contacts with all of these different countries have allowed for more of a consulting role and an insight role, workshops for their people. For me, that's not where I buzz. That's not where I get excited. Where I get excited is seeing that growth of individuals and seeing their eyes light up when first of all, with them sort of deer caught in the headlights in the first couple of weeks of, oh my God, you've got really senior CEOs of companies and people just being like, I don't think we can do, honestly, I don't even know how, I don't know where to go. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. I promise you, this is exactly where you need to be right now. Next week, it will be very different. We have a call next week. And it's like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Look what we've come up with. I'm like, I know. And it's going to be even better in a week's time. And then by the end of it, people are just buzzing and just look at what we've managed to do. And you have these incredible results, both with the organizations and with the individuals. And you see this, and then you get photos of the 31st of December and someone posting, this was like a third of the best of my life this year. And I just think I need to keep that going. So
yeah,
I won't risk that.
That's amazing. And I've got to say, we're having a conversation next week about how I can get my team involved. I think it's fantastic. I can't wait to look closely at how we might be able to do something together. I can guarantee
I'd love
you
to
that.
Just reach out and I can explain more for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So what about the personal future then? So you said that the projects aren't really now local to you anymore. So
we do have one with Leo
Yeah.
Burnett kicking off in May. We do have one with this incredible, I'll be doing a podcast actually with her on Thursday next week to raise awareness of it. But yeah, we have with a children's organization who've been really, really, really impacted by the pandemic. But it's harder here because of the language.
Right.
But she does speak fluent English, and that certainly helps. But yeah, no, the majority of our projects are elsewhere.
So do you think that means that that might not always be home, or may there be other movements on the horizon? May that nomadic streak come back?
You know what? That question comes up a lot, as you can imagine. Loads of people, particularly here. I don't know if you find that, you might not find that so much in Dubai, but certainly here, there's a huge exodus of Brazilians that just feel, with Bolsonaro, and there's just been a lot of challenges politically here. So there are a lot of people who are just desperate to leave. And so when they see me, I don't know, I'll be renewing my driver's license or something. And then the person who's sort of renewing, it's like, why are you here? My daughter's, about to move to Canada, and my other daughter's about to move to the States. And why are you here? I love it here. And I really do feel like it's home. My two children are very Brazilian right now. I do think that they'll probably do some sort of exchange. But I'll be honest, when I go back to England a lot, a lot. I used to go back like 3-4 times a year. It's been a pandemic. I've been back once. I went back in January. I'm going back in June. Maybe I go twice a year now. I have no idea. But I go back to London. I love my friends. I love my contacts. I've got an incredible base of contacts. And I probably, to be honest, knowing London, I probably see them the same amount of times as if I lived there, to be completely honest, because that's kind of how things work. But I don't know if I see myself there. And then I think, do I see myself in Canada? No. Do I see myself in South Africa? No. Maybe Portugal, but do I see myself moving to Portugal right now? No. So right now, this is home. Who knows what happens? I think it's important to just live one day at a time, be happy in the now. I am. And once I think one thing I have learned over the course of just so much change and everything, when things feel like they need to change, and then you do something about it. And until then, I'm just going to enjoy where I'm at.
Yeah, well, that's really, really good take on on how to look upon it, I think. And I can empathize with that a lot. And I think you try and plan for the long range when you've already sort of thrown your life, not a curveball, but you've decided that your life is not going to be linear. So to try and plan for it being linear for the next 20, 30, 40 years, there's not a lot of point really, because in yourself that, as you've just put it, at some point something's going to happen, and because you're of that mindset, you're going to be flexible enough to say, do you know what, time for change. Then exactly. you may as well have an open playbook, I suppose. So Look, Philippa, I've had such fun speaking with you, such an interesting conversation. Thank
you so much for having me.
No
I
problem
really
at all.
enjoyed it. Thank you for all the good questions.
well, I did my best. Thank you. Where can we find out more for the people listening? Where can they find out more about Thai, about yourself? What's the easiest way for them to do that?
Well, our website, theinternationalexchange.co.uk. If you're keen on understanding more about Thai Accelerator, if you're an individual that might be wanting to get on board, that's obviously not the corporate side, that's sort of Thai Accelerator. We don't have anything happening right now, but you can just understand more about just the vibe and why people get involved at apply.thaiaccelerator.com. We have a podcast, Thai Unearthed. So if you are podcast listeners, which you probably are, you can also just check out, we've got some interesting, it's just basically around me talking to people who are making the world a better place and in their own unique ways. And they come from so many different backgrounds. So just we have a newsletter. You can join the newsletter. You can get our updates, and just thank you for having me. And thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
No problem at all, Philippa. You have a great rest of week, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Thanks again for your time.